This is why you better work on your draw speed. Seconds matter. When he pulls a knife on you, you had better be ready to respond. You need a sub 2 second draw. You need to be able to avoid this situation. When this happens, you just have so little time. That's why I'm talking to you today about the Mantis TitanX. Just received it. You saw my previous video. I've been doing some open training and using the shot timer. And I'm going to go through both of those. There are many other things that you can do. I'm just at the tip of the iceberg at this point, trying to learn how to use the various drills. First up, let's look at the holster. This is the Glock 17 version of the TitanX that I'm going to be comparing to my Umarex Glock 17 T4E. Just for safety purposes, I'm using the Umarex launcher. Here's the TitanX and the same holster for the Glock 17. So how do you get started with this TitanX in terms of using the app? Well, there's just a simple on-off right here. One press of this button right here is going to be what you use to turn it on. And it's going to blink green until you sync it with the Bluetooth on your phone, and then it'll turn blue, and then it's connected, and that's exactly how you do it. And you can turn it back off by just pressing and holding it for about 2 seconds, and then it's going to go back off. So when it's synced, it's recording all the data, and then you get into the drills, and the drills are going to give you all of this interesting feedback. So first thing I did was just straight shots. Let's look at that data first, and then we're going to do some drawing from the holster, which is a little more challenging. Now each shot is registered on the app, and I can visually see the red dot hitting the target or wherever it's hitting each time. My scores were very good, but you're standing still. So the thing that you have to keep in mind is that you do have movement pre-shot, pulling the trigger, and post-shot. The yellow is your during the trigger pull, but the blue is what you're seeing before the shot. That's when you're getting on target. You got the yellow during the trigger pull, and then the X is the actual time of the trigger of the shot. So these are my shots. I'm going through them here, and you can see when you're standing still and you're not moving and you're focused on a single target. In a dry fire situation like this, it's easy to stay really close to the target. These were about as good as you get, about scoring 90 and up. And I think this just illustrates how the app tells you all this information. Now, when you're shooting well, it's not going to give you a lot more to know. You know that you're hitting the target well. But when you start to do other drills, that's where this data becomes really more important. Now comes the hard part. This is where the rubber meets the road. When you're drawing from a holster and you're firing, and you have to clear the holster, you have to get on target, you have to find your target, you have to then do the trigger pull and avoid any momentum and post-shot pull. There's a red color that also starts to show up here a lot more. That's after the shot, with results that are downright shocking at times, hard to believe. Yes, not bad. The scores were in the 30s when I first started doing this. My shot times, I was still doing it relatively fast. I was around 2 seconds, a little above, but look at this, 38.7 is my score. So you can see it went from the 90s down to the 30s. When I incorporated movement, I had a lot more drag and pulling down on the shot. And I just found that it was much more challenging here, because you've got to you've got a long blue line trying to get up to find your target. And then the trigger pull is not so nice and short. You can see the yellow line will be much larger and it can go off target from where you intended to shoot. The center of the bullseye is where the trigger pull began in most cases. That's where I was aiming. That's where I was close. But by the time that I pulled the trigger and the shot fired in the system, the computational analysis showed that I was going off target to some degree, and my score was dropping. So it's this kind of movement and deviation that caused my score to drop a lot, even though I was pushing the times, so maybe I was pushing a little too fast. But the point here is that you can improve. So I did this a little more after this first set. I had one in the 30s, I had another in the 30s, but I eventually got some shots, like for example, this shot, I got a 79, and I was able to get the mechanics down a little bit more. I still had some suggestions on what I should do, but I was ultimately able, with just a few reps on the very first day, just doing a few more reps, I was able to get a shot like this one where the blue is still has to follow that path from the holster, clear the holster and get up. But look, my yellow was a lot less. It was a much better shot. It got a much better score. So I did improve over time. And my goal ultimately is to get a sub 2 second shot and get up above 80 and get something like this or better routinely. And I think that's where the practice comes in, and putting in the reps with a system like this, you can really excel and you can learn and you can advance. And so I want to show you an example here at the end where at the end of the day I went back, I revisited it again, and you can see now I got up into the 50s and 60s. So I was able to essentially double my scores within the same day, coming back in the evening and trying again based on what I had learned earlier. And I was able to then tighten up my shots. I felt like I was doing it a little more slower and methodical, but I was still able to get my times reasonable, around the 2 second mark or less. And so I think the power of this is that you analyze the data and you find out where you're going wrong. And what for me, I think I was doing really well getting the gun out of the holster, getting it up to go on target. This was my very best score, 89.4 from the holster. I'm pretty good at getting it up and pointed toward the target downrange, but I'm not very good at slowing down then and getting a good shot at that point. So I still have a lot to work on, but that's the power of this system.